David Berkowitz, 24 years old, a postal
After
worker.
more than 13 months of following thousands of leads,
He looked me straight in the
after my sources say
New Mexico and Flagstaff, Arizona.
In a neighborhood of the Bronx called South Bay, and in Forest Hills near the famous tennis club, the killer has struck 6 times since last summer, and 5 are dead.
David Berkowitz, known as Son of Sam, was born in Brooklyn, New York City in 1953. David was the result of an affair between his biological mother, Betty, and Joseph, a married businessman. Joseph did not want to raise him and abandoned him, telling Betty that she could raise him herself if she wanted to. Betty's financial situation was bad, and she was unable to raise her son, so she had to place him for adoption. Because they were unable to have children, the couple who adopted him was the ideal family to accept a child in need for a home. However, when David was 7 years old, his father mistakenly said the word adoption. And since that day, David knew that they were not his real family. And this led to a variety of psychological problems for David. And at that time, a car ran over and hit him, resulting a head injury, and David started to isolate. He struggled with making friends and connecting to the point where his father and mother would take him to psychologists. His mother adored and loved him, but his father thought that adopting him was a mistake. He has been suffering from a variety of psychological problems during his childhood. And when he was 14, his mother was diagnosed with cancer and died. Her death had a major effect on him, his mental health, and his personality. She was the only one who loved him, and his father married another woman after a short time, which increased his anger towards his father and made him more angry and nervous. In trying to empty these feelings inside him, he used to play with fire, catching insects and stray animals and burning them, and starting fires in trash cans near neighborhoods and even the neighbors' homes. This is one of the early signs that a criminal personality is forming. When David became 18, he joined the army to get away from his father. And in the army, he learned how to use weapons. And after 3 years, he found that the army was not the right fit for him. So he returned to New York City, left his father, and lived alone. His dream was to be a fireman at first, but this did not work out for him. So he accepted a low-paying job as a security guard. And because most of his shifts were at night, he was always thinking to himself. He felt strange and lonely that others did not accept him, and that this was hurting him. And when he sees a happy couple with each other, his hatred became stronger and his thoughts went to dangerous areas. After a while, David tried to contact his biological mother, Betty. He was holding for anything that may change him back into a regular man being, since he thought he was drowning in darkness. And in 1974, just 1 year before his murders started, he found his mother and talked with her, and she was happy when they met, and a lovely relationship formed between them. And David began to experience the mother's love and care once more, but this happiness did not last. David discovered that he had a half-sister, and here he began to think that his mother had given him up for adoption, while his sister had raised and loved her. And here the feelings of hatred began to appear again, and he began to feel that he was the abandoned child that even his real mother did not want. So he cut off communication with his mother and returned to his isolation and darkness. And a lot of psychologists used to say that a note of women began to grow in him. And here he returned to his old love, fire. It was one of the things that took out his anger and negative feelings inside him. And over a period of 3 years, David lit over 1,500 fires in various areas of New York, most of which didn't end with deaths, but he was writing them all down in his diaries. And after that, David became attracted to evil groups and demon worshippers and began to read their books and read about their thoughts. And he spent the entire month of November in 1975 isolated in his apartment, putting fabrics on the windows and nailing them so that no sunlight could enter. And he began writing strange writings on the walls, drawing satanic drawings and writing about the voices he heard inside him, which he claimed were satanic voices ordering him to kill. David decided to start the first of his murders on Christmas Eve, in December 24 of 1975. He was carrying a huge hunting knife that he had hidden. He started walking in the streets and came upon a young girl alone in the street. He grabbed her and stabbed her, so the girl screamed and ran away. So he ran away also and went to another street, where he saw another girl alone in the street. And this girl was 15 years old. So he went to her and stabbed her in the middle of the street in the same way. The two girls were stabbed many times, but they only got minor injuries and weren't killed, so his first two attempts failed. Then, in January in 1976, David moved to a new home in a different neighborhood. He lived next to an old man named Sam, who had a dog that was always barking. David got annoyed by the dog's nightly barking and claimed that the dog is a demon who barking ordering him to kill. David was tired of the dog's barking, so he got a Molotov cocktail and threw it in his neighbor's garden. But the Molotov cocktail did not hurt the dog, so the dog then survived and continued barking a few days later, which David considered a sign that he need to keep killing because the dog will not settle down. And because David had failed with his first knife attempts, he chose to use a 44 caliber revolver. David went out in his car in the early morning hours of July 29 in 1976 to seek for his victim. He found two girls, Donna, 18 years old, and Judy, 19 years old. Judy wanted to drive her friend Donna to her home, so she arrived and parked next to her home, and then stopped to say goodbyes. Then a man suddenly approached the car and fired 5 shots at them and went away. Donna was hit in the neck and killed, while Judy was injured in the thigh and survived. After that, the investigators arrived and looked at the crime scene, discovering from the bullets that the weapon used in the crime was a 44 caliber revolver, which is considered a rare weapon. When David left the crime area, he was singing on his way home, feeling a sense of happiness and pride that he had taken over a happy person's life. The authorities were unable to determine the cause of the case and assumed it was simply a random gang crime, because in the 1970s, crimes were popular in New York and the highest in America. And when David woke up the next day to discover no news of the crime he had committed in the media, so he got angry and considered that his crime was meaningless, since he wanted it to be in the news and shake the entire city. And on October 23 in 1976, David went out in his car to find a new victim. So he drove to Lovers Street in New York, where he saw a young man in a car with his girlfriend. Carl and Rosemary were sitting in their parked car when David approached and shot at them, shattering the glass. Rosemary quickly started the car and rushed away for help, even though Carl was bleeding from a shot to the head. The afraid couple had no idea someone had been shooting at them, although Rosemary had only minor injuries from the shattered glass. Carl later required a mental plate to repair a piece of his skull. David was not seen by either of the victims. And on November 27 in 1976, David went out again to look for his new victim and found 2 girls sitting on the doorstep of a house, 16 years old Donna and 18 years old Juan. As they told, a man approached them. He began to ask them for directions before taking out a revolver and shoot at them. They both fell injured and the shooter ran away. Both girls survived, but Joanne became paralyzed and lost her ability to walk. On the 30th of January in 1977, that night there was a 26-year-old woman named Christine who was going to the cinema with her fiancé. When they finished, they went to their car and drove away. David came across them on the road and followed them till they stopped on the side of the road. Then David got closer to the car. 3 gunshots pierced the car. In a panic, her fiancé drove away seeking for help. He had minor superficial injuries, while Christine was shot twice in the head and died. This is evidence that David was focusing on killing girls more. The police began to see similarities between this crime and the previous crimes, especially because of the type of weapon used, even though the crimes were all random and had no connection, but the weapon was the only connection. And from here, the police began referring to David as the .44 caliber killer. The police also discovered a pattern for the victims, and the most of them were women with long black hair, which was confirmed by the next victim. On the 8th of March in 1977, Virginia, a Columbia University student, was walking alone home when David came towards her and shot her. Virginia raised the book to her face in trying to defend herself, but David shot her in the face through the box and killed her. The interesting thing about this murder is that it happened at 7 p.m., while previous crimes happened at sunrise or late at night, showing that his self-confidence increased and he became used to kill. When the authorities discovered the same bullets at the crime scene, they knew that they were dealing with a serial killer. 2 days after this killing, the New York police chief held a press conference and stated that they are now investigating a serial killer who kills at random and mostly targets women. Now David achieved his goal and received the attention he desired, and his name took headlines and he became known as the .44 caliber killer.
Alright, it's decision time. Like if you think this video rocks, and subscribe if you want to see more awesomeness in the future. When his crimes began to appear in the newspapers, David was happy that he had achieved his goal, and the entire city knew his name and feared him, because serial killers are more dangerous to people than gang criminals, because gang criminals kill with a purpose, whereas serial killers kill randomly without a purpose. David was also collecting newspaper articles about his crimes and hanging them on the wall as an expression of pride. Residents of New York City became terrified because David's crimes were spread all over the city, and residents noticed that the killer was targeting a specific group, which is women with long and dark hair. So women flocked to salons to change the color of their hair and cut it as well. The situation in the city was insane.
Do you feel personally threatened by the .44 caliber killer because you have long dark hair?
Yes, I do.
Has his existence in any way interfered with your movements at night?
Yes, I stay in.
You didn't stay in the past?
No. I don't feel free to go out, to walk the streets or go out at all.
I'm afraid. I'm afraid to go out in the car. I'm afraid to do anything. Never know where he's going to be.
All of this, and David only killed 3 victims, but the randomness and reputation of the crimes brought people into this situation, which caused the New York Police Department to take this case very seriously and to create a work team called Omega, which included around 300 police officers, and their only mission is to catch the killer. And on April 16, 1977, David attacked again. Alexander, 20 years old, and Valentina, 18 years old, were killed, and David went to them when they were sitting in the car beside the road at 3 a.m. and shot them through the windshield, resulting in the deaths of the 2 victims and an increase in the death rate. The death shows David increasing confidence. And this time, David decided to leave a note at the crime location, and he wrote in it, "I'm a monster. I'm the son of Sam. I'm a stranger to you. I'm a programmed on a wave different from everyone. Programmed to kill. But in order to stop me, you must kill me. I'm a wild beast. I love hunting, roaming the streets, looking for my victims. I love delicious meat. New York women, they are the most beautiful."
And he signed this letter in the name of Son of Sam.
After that, his name was changed in all the newspapers to Son of Sam. And this is the name that he became famous for. No one knew the meaning of his name at this time. But in the end, they knew that David took his name from his neighbor Sam, who owns the dog. So he called himself this name because he believed that his neighbor's dog was possessed by a demon, and that its constant barking was an order from Satan to kill. David has been suffering from the dog's barking till now, and he considers himself living in suffering, and he has been sending letters of threats to his neighbor about the dog. But under a fake name, on April 27 in 1977, David tried to murder the dog again. But this time, he used a gun and shot him through the window. But the dog was just scratched, so his neighbor Sam called the cops. They came, but didn't know who fired the shot. A month after this incident, David wrote another letter to a journalist named Jimmy Burslin, who was one of the most famous journalists at that time. And David wrote to a journalist a long letter in which he talked about his old crimes and particularly mentioned Donna, his first victim, and wrote about her until now, 1 year after her crime, and wrote that she was a nice girl. They should honor her memory. He also encouraged the cops to arrest him and wished them luck and success. He also said that if he was captured, he would buy each of them new shoes. This message indicates that he is a person suffering from mental problems, and this message caused huge fear and terror among New York citizens. And the police received about 250 calls per day from people reporting people who suspect them. And the police and investigators were working with full effort. And this case is considered the largest pursuit of a person carried out by the police in New York history. And one of the police attempts was to put a doll inside the car as bait and stop the car on the side of the road, but all of their attempts failed.
On June 26 in 1977, Son of Sam did a new murder. His victims were two lovers, Judy and Sam, who were in their car on the side of the road when David suddenly came towards them and shot them. But this time the two victims survived, despite Judy being hit by 3 bullets and Sal being hit by 1. A month later, he carried out another crime in the same way on 2 lovers, Stacy and Robert. And his attack this time shocked New York, since Stacy had blonde hair. This was Stacy and Robert's first date, and their parents were stopping them from going out because they were afraid of Son of Sam. But they told them that the killer is not targeting blondes. In the act of murder, David approached them in the same way and shot them, killing Stacy, and Robert survived. But he was harmed in his eyes, and he got blind as a result of the crime, which caused such panicked fear that the New York Times boldly stated, "No one is safe from Son of Sam." Everyone was terrified of becoming the next victim. And let's hear from one of the journalists there at that time.
People genuinely were afraid to go out. You cannot overestimate or exaggerate just how much that fear gripped the city.
Although his victims were few, the random method of his killing terrified people everywhere, And of course, David was happy that all his dreams of fame had come true. So he enjoyed each crime he committed more than the one before it. And the police were stepping up their efforts as much as possible, with 75 investigators and 225 police officers working on the case. And they were chasing one person. They discovered an important witness, a 49-year-old woman named Cecilia. After several days of investigations, Cecilia was walking in a street near the crime scene on the night of the crime. And only minutes before the crime took place, she saw a strange person carrying something in his hands and expressed her fear. When she noticed him, she instantly changed her path and went away from him, and she heard the gunfire a few minutes later. Cecilia claims that as soon as she learned about the crime the next day, her attention turned to the man she saw on the street. And now for the important part. Cecilia told the police that she saw a cop giving a ticket to a car parked next to a fire extinguisher. And Cecilia suspected that this car was for this strange man because he was coming from the same direction as the car. So the investigators looked into the matter, but they found no record confirming that this happened. But Cecilia insisted that a police officer put a ticket in this location. So the investigators searched it again, but no tickets were found. But Cecilia insisted again. Then one of the investigators went to the police station in that area and looked for the police officer in charge of that area that night. And the officer told him that there were tickets, but that night I forgot them in my safe and did not record them. But I did record them the next night. Here, the detectives discovered 4 violations that night, one of which was in the name of David Berkeley.
That third attempt to pick up that summons, if we didn't make 3 efforts, we would have not got Berkowitz then.
Finally, the investigators tracked down David and discovered his residence, calling the local police station to ask about him. But the policewoman who answered the phone was the daughter of Sam, the daughter of the old man who owns a dog that David named himself Son of Sam. He was a weird person, according to the girl, who always had difficulties with the neighbors. Sam, her father, suspected him of attempting to kill his dog. When the police heard this, they assumed he was the wanted person. So they went to his home and started spying on him. And they found his car and approached it, trying to look inside it through the glass. And they noticed an automatic gun in the backseat. So they opened the car by force and found inside it a message in the same phone as Son of Sam. And it was addressed to the police with a message written in it, "You will not be able to stop me. I'm going to drive you insane." The police confirmed that David is the son of Sam, so they closed the car and stayed hidden in the area waiting for him to leave. They waited for nearly 4 hours before David came out of his apartment to get into his car, but before he could start it, all the cops and detectives surrounded him. According to the police chief, David turned his head slowly while smiling and said to him, "Finally, you caught me. Why are you late?" He seemed calm and confident, as if he was prepared for it. Therefore, he was arrested and placed in the car. While they were in the car on the road, the journalists were waiting for David at the main police station. David said to the cops in the car, "The journalists are waiting for me now. Can you do my hair?" Then, in the middle of the police convoy, Son of Sam arrived at the police station. A large gathering of people and media had gathered to see him. David walked with a smile on his face, as though he was happy and proud of his accomplishments. The authorities organized a large press conference in which they displayed his weapon and proved an order to assure everyone that they had captured him. and that the nightmare of New York City was over. And then they went to look over his flat and discovered strange things. They discovered newspaper clippings containing his crimes and pictures of all his victims, as well as drawings, satanic writings, and satanic symbols on the walls. They also discovered holes in the walls, and David claimed that voices of demons were coming from those holes and ordering him to kill. So he would sometimes hit the walls to stop these sounds, but the voices never stopped, and there were notes written on the walls next to each of the holes where he was writing what he heard from the demons. And one of them was, "Hello, my name is Mr. William, and I live in this hole, and I have several children, and I'm raising them to be killers, and excited to see them kill." According to the case primary investigator, this is the most shiver-inducing thing I have ever seen in my life.
It just was a sight I never forgot. And it's the only thing in my lifetime that, if I talk about it, I get the chills.
During the police research, David confessed to all of his crimes and began talking about the demons he heard through the walls, as well as his neighbor's dog who was always barking and directing him to kill, and explained everything that had happened to him. There was journalists who had conspiracy theory that Son of Sam was not one person, but was a part of a satanic group, and that these crimes were committed by more than one person. And there is a journalist named Maury Terry who spent his life looking into this case, from the beginning of this case until he died, looking into it, and was a believer in this satanic thing, and that David was not one person, and this person wrote an entire book on this subject and called it The Ultimate Evil. After being convicted, David was sentenced to 6 lifetimes in a prison for each individual he killed. At the start of his prison years, he was very violent and got into many fights. Even one time a prisoner attacked him with a knife and wounded him deeply in his neck. And the strange thing is that after 10 years in prison, David converted completely and became a devout Christian and began to pray and advise other prisoners. And when the time for his conditional release came, David asked the board to cancel the meeting and wrote to them in his letter, "Honestly, I believe that I deserve to be in prison for the rest of my life. With the help of God, I have come to terms with my situation and have accepted my punishment." He is requalified for a conditional release review every 2 years, but he has never attended. The Son of Sam is still alive and well in the prison today. Before you go, my amazing subscribers, I must remind you of an incredible story that deserves your attention. If you haven't already watched my previous video about the jaw-dropping Nigerian scammer, you are in for a treat. Click the link on the screen and let's continue our quest for knowledge.